Hey guys, back again with another video. I want to talk about the NES Mini that was announced. Actually, it's been a while ago now, but I wanted to talk about it because I thought it was a very interesting announcement, and it came out of left field for a company like Nintendo. I feel I think a lot of people were very surprised by this announcement. It came around the same time like Pokemon Go was really huge, and everyone was just obsessed with that. Which that I could talk about in another video as well, but. This is going to be like a kind of a two-part video. Well, not separated into two parts, but I first wanted to talk about the NES Mini, and then talk about like a Super Nintendo Mini, which is actually something I want to see even more than the NES Mini, and talking about what games I would like to see on it and what games I think would be on it. But let's talk about the NES Mini first, and what this is. People obviously, I think pretty much anyone watching this is going to know what it is. But briefly, it's like a miniature NES, like that you can hold in the palm of your hand, and it comes with like a replica NES controller. It's basically the exact same as the original NES controller, and you can actually use them for you can attach them to a Wiimote and kind of use them for virtual console games, but it's got 30 packed in games. Unfortunately, one of the negatives with it is that fact that you can't add any games to it. You're stuck with this list of 30 games. That's disappointing. I think it would have been really cool to basically have like flash memory or something like that, where you can download games from, say, the virtual console through like an internet connection and add NES games to the console itself. But this is, I think, a really cool system for like people that didn't grow up with an NES but have always wanted to try a lot of its games, its most popular games, because the list of games is actually really strong, and it's not just Nintendo first party games. Which would have been very disappointing. Like, they've got games like Final Fantasy on here, Mega Man 2, Castlevania 1 and 2. They've got some third party support on this, which is really fantastic. And I think the list of games is very strong overall. And I think it's going to be a nice Christmas gift as well. It comes out around the holidays, I think November, and I think this thing's going to sell out like crazy. Like it's going to be tough to find in the holidays. I'm going to probably get it. The NES, I grew up with it. It's a very nostalgic system for me. I've played a lot of the games that are on this, but there's a few that I haven't played, and it's so much cheaper than getting an actual NES. And I had an NES and a bunch of games. I sold it, which I kind of regret, but in some ways I don't, just because it's too expensive to collect for the NES. It's way too expensive. It's way too hard to find games. It's a very popular system for collecting. But I think this is a cool system. I'm definitely going to pick it up, especially if you get like another controller. It would be a lot of fun with like some of these two-player games. Like I said before, the only negative I have with it, I wish you could add games to it. It's very affordable too. It's only like $60 in US. I think it's like 80 in Canada, that's a bit unfortunate. It's still a good deal though. When you consider the fact that each of these games on the Virtual Console are $5, when you add that all up, it's actually quite a significant amount more than the $60 you're paying for this system. And then you just get like this cool little system that you can put on your shelf or next to your TV with these great NES controllers. Yeah, I think it's great for people that are nostalgic for the NES and want to play some of these games, and for people that didn't grow up with the system. The game list itself is really strong, like I said too. There's a few things that really I take issue with. For instance, Castlevania 1 and 2, but not Castlevania 3. Like, what the fuck? Like, Castlevania 2, I know some people really like that game. I don't like it. I can't stand it. But Castlevania 3 is really underrated. Like, that's actually one of the best Castlevania games. So it's a bit unfortunate to see that it's not on here. Mega Man 3 and like Mega Man 2 is an awesome game, but I prefer Mega Man 3, and that's another classic game. I really wish that was on there as well. There's probably a few other games that I'm missing. Star Tropics is a cool addition. I'm glad Star Tropics is on there. Also, Final Fantasy. Dragon Warrior is maybe a missed opportunity there. I think Dragon Warrior should be on there. But yeah, it's a very strong list of 30 games, and I'm looking forward to the NES Mini. But let's talk about the Super Nintendo Mini, which I would be way more excited for because it's my favorite console of all time. And, I was thinking, and this is the main discussion point of this video, I was thinking, would they do a 30 game setup for that? And You know what? I actually think they would go with only 20 games, actually. And the Super Nintendo Mini would be more expensive. I think the Super Nintendo Mini is going to happen as long as the NES Mini does well, which I think it will. N64 Mini, I don't see happening. I just with the controller and just the fact that honestly, Nintendo's first party lineup for that system wasn't that strong. They wouldn't be able to get the rare games like Conker's Bad Fur Day and things like that and GoldenEye. So N64, I don't see happening. A Game Boy would be a little weird. I don't see a Game Boy happening. Really, NES and Super Nintendo are the only ones I see happening for this. But yeah, I can see 20 games, but I've got a list of 30 games here. And when I came up with this list, I was thinking of what games are for sure going to be on a list for the Super Nintendo Mini. And I've got a list of on the side here of games that I would like to see on a Super Nintendo Mini, but are obviously not going to happen. So I'll talk about those after. But with these 30 games, these are games I think Nintendo would put on there, and then some of these are third-party games I think are going to be put on there. A lot of these are kind of the classic games, what I think are classic games for the Super Nintendo. So let's go through the list here, and then after the video is done, I'm very curious to see what you guys think would be on there and what you would want to see on a Super Nintendo Mini, as well as with the NES Mini as well. But with my list, we've got Chrono Trigger. I think Chrono Trigger, excuse me, would definitely be on there. It's just such a classic JRPG, and this is already where I'm seeing like I have 30 games here, and obviously, a Super Nintendo Mini would be more expensive than the NES Mini, but like Chrono Trigger itself, I mean, you can find it on the DS for $20, and even for $20, I think that game is worth it. But of course, it is on the Virtual Console on the original Wii, not on the Wii U. So I could see it on here, and they had Square's support with the NES with Final Fantasy on there, so. I think it's a no-brainer. I think Chrono Trigger would definitely make an appearance. Super Mario RPG, another Squaresoft game, and that just released on Virtual Console on the Wii U not too long ago. So I think that's a very real possibility. And that's one of those games that came out late in the Super Nintendo's lifespan, in 1996 when the N64 came out. In fact, I want to say the N64 was probably out at the time Super Mario RPG came out. But Mario RPG is a fantastic game. I fucking love that game. I grew up with it. It's one of my favorite games ever, really. And I can see it being on there. Super Mario World is a given. In fact, of any game, that is definitely the game that would have to be on there. Amazing game. One of my favorite platformers. Street Fighter 2, we've seen that Capcom did have games for the NES Mini, so I definitely think they would have some games on this. And Street Fighter 2 was one of the most popular games. Now, what version of it, I have no idea. Probably the Turbo version. I think there was like a few new characters in that one. I only ever played like the original Street Fighter 2 on Super Nintendo with like the very limited amount of characters, but that would definitely be on there. Now, I've got Yoshi's Island listed on here, but actually, the more I think about it, unfortunately, I don't think it would actually be on a Super Nintendo Mini. This, Star Fox, and Stunt Race FX, which is kind of like an obscure game, all of these games used, from what I understand, the Super FX chip, and these games have never made an appearance on the Virtual Console, on the Wii or the Wii U. In fact, the only version of Yoshi's Island we've got is the GBA version, which has like this muted color palette. It doesn't control as well. The music's not as good. It's like the sound quality wise. It's just not a great version of that game. And Yoshi's Island is my favorite Mario game. It's my favorite platformer of all time. So it's very disappointing to realize that there's a good chance that it wouldn't be on there, which is very disappointing. And Star Fox is disappointing as well because that's such a notable game on the Super Nintendo. And the Super FX chip, I think there's something with licensing where they just cannot get those games on the Virtual Console. So I could be wrong. It might make an appearance on this Super Nintendo Mini. I would really hope so, since they're such amazing games. Well, at least Yoshi's Island. Star Fox I haven't played in years, but yeah, I'm a bit iffy on that. So I don't know. Those might not make it. Zelda: Link to the Past is obvious. That would definitely make it on here. Fantastic game. One of my favorite Zelda games. Super Metroid, another classic game. I really enjoy Super Metroid, and I think it would definitely make it on this. The Zelda games are on the NES Mini. The original Metroid is on the NES Mini. Kirby Superstar. I think out of the Kirby games on the Super Nintendo, that one's probably the most popular. I know a lot of people really like Kirby Dream Land 3. The Super Nintendo cartridge of that is very expensive, so it would be cool to see that game on here. But I think Kirby Superstar probably makes the most sense. And that's another game I think some people missed too. That game came out late in the Super Nintendo's lifespan. Castlevania 4 is definitely going to be on there. Konami, obviously, they're going to get some Konami games, and that's one of the most high-profile ones. Castlevania Dracula X, a lot of people would probably like to see that game on here since it's so expensive now. But I think they would pick, obviously, they would pick Castlevania 4 over that one. I don't see Dracula X making it. Contra 3, I think would definitely make it. Now, the original Contra did not make it onto the NES Mini, and I've kind of confused why it didn't. It's actually not on Virtual Console, or surprisingly enough. In fact, it's not on the PlayStation Network either. I don't know. Maybe there's some licensing problem with the original Contra, but I think Contra 3 is on the Virtual Console on the Wii U and Wii, so I'm pretty sure this would make the Super Nintendo, and that's a classic game. Donkey Kong Country, I think would make it. Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3, I don't think would. And these are rare games, but Nintendo still owns the rights to all the Donkey Kong games, and they're on the Virtual Console. So I think Donkey Kong Country would make it. Donkey Kong Country 2 would probably make it as well. And that's my favorite of the three. As much as I would like to see Donkey Kong Country 3 make the list of 30, I don't see it happening. People just aren't as fond as that one. I don't like that one as much as Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2, which is a shame. I like it better than the first game. I think it's really underrated, and every time people complain about it, it's always because of Kiddy Kong, that he's a shitty character, and not about the actual gameplay for the game, which is unfortunate. But yeah, Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2, I can definitely see them being on here. Mega Man X, I think, is a given. Not Mega Man X2, X3, or 7, or Mega Man Soccer, unfortunately. As such a huge Mega Man fan, I would love to see the rest of them on here, but it's not going to happen. Especially when you look at the NES Mini and the fact that only Mega Man 2 made it. It's just going to be Mega Man X. Super Mario Kart, that's definitely going to be on here. I don't see why not. F-Zero, I know a lot of people don't like the original F-Zero. I'm not crazy about it, but to diversify the genres of the 30 games, I think they need a few racing games, and F-Zero is one of the racing games that they Nintendo put out. Earthbound, I is going to be on here, I think. Years ago, I would have said no, but it was released on Wii U Virtual Console not too long ago. And rumors are we're going to get Mother 3 at some point. And Earthbound is such a classic game. So yeah, I can see it for sure making the list. Now, Final Fantasy 3 and 2 and 3 are 6 and 4. I actually don't know whether they would only put one of these or both. I'm actually leaning towards both. They both have a lot of fans, probably Final Fantasy 6 more so, but those are kind of like classic Super Nintendo RPGs. They'd be stupid not to put those on here. Super Ghouls and Ghosts, I think as far as Capcom games, is going to make it. Ghosts and Goblins made it on the NES Mini. Gradius 3, I think is going to make it as well. The original Gradius made it on the original NES Mini. And again, to diversify the genres, they need some shooters. Super Punch-Out is, I think, going to make it. Super Punch-Out is kind of weird. Like, the original Punch-Out is so well regarded. People talk about it all the time, but Super Punch-Out doesn't get the same respect the original does. I haven't put too much time into it, but I always did find that kind of odd, but I think that's definitely going to make the list. ActRaiser, maybe a surprise choice, but that's one of those games I feel like a lot of people played on the Super Nintendo. It was an early release. A lot of people are really fond of it. I've tried to get into it. I don't really like the simulation aspects of it. ActRaiser 2 I actually probably like more because it's just pure platforming, side-scrolling platforming. But ActRaiser I think is going to make it. Square owns that. Square Enix owns that. So I think that has a good chance. Kirby's Dream Course. I was thinking about other Kirby games, and I think you've got Avalanche and Dream Course. Dream Course is like the golf game, and Avalanche is like the puzzle game. And I think Dream Course is different enough and well liked enough that I think it would actually make it on the list of 30 games. Miss Pac-Man, I think, would make it, like the port of that game, because Pac-Man, the NES version of Pac-Man, was on the NES Mini. Pilot Wings, I think. I think is going to be on there. I know that's not a game that a lot of people love, but again, to kind of diversify the genres, I think it would make it. Secret of Mana, a lot of people love that game. I don't like it. Controversial opinion, maybe. I've never liked Secret of Mana, but a lot of people fucking love that game. But now that I'm looking at it, it's like there's so many Square Enix games I've put on here, so many Square Enix RPGs, and as much as I like them, maybe they would cut out a few of these. Maybe they would cut out a few of the like one of the Final Fantasies, and maybe Secret of Mana wouldn't make it. Maybe they would choose some oddball games over it. But I put it on the list anyways. SimCity. I feel like that was actually a popular game for Super Nintendo that a lot of people played, and it's different enough that I think it would make a smart inclusion. Tecmo Super Bowl, I put that because I think Tecmo Bowl is going to be on the NES one. I've avoided sports games because I'm just not familiar with sports games. I don't know what like a lot of sports games people played, but maybe Nintendo would put a few on here to replace some of the games I've chosen. As much as I would hate to see that, even though I actually feel like NES and Super Nintendo sports games are the best sports games, I would much rather play them than like Madden 2015 or whatever. But I put that on there. And finally, Wario's Woods, just to have a puzzle game on there. I don't think Tetris Attack would make it. And Wario's Woods was not on the NES Mini, so I figure they'll probably put it on this, even though I really can't stand Wario's Woods. But yeah, I look at this list. There's maybe a little too many RPGs, and maybe there's some oddball Super Nintendo games I'm not thinking of that they would put on here instead. But if that was a list of 30 games, and they did have the Yoshi's Island and the Star Fox that I've got here, and there were no problems with getting those on here, like holy shit, like that would be an insane value. I would be fucking excited for that. That's one of the reasons why I think there's actually only going to be 20 games compared to the 30 on the NES. But even then, I mean, the library of games, man, like that's a lot of fucking great games. Like the Super Nintendo was fucking killer for games. But let's move on to games that I would love to see on it, but would not. I just don't see any of these making it. First off, Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Maybe they could pull something and get that game on here, but that's like this really fun co-op game that a lot of people love, but I don't know, man. I just have a hard time seeing it making it on the system. But I could be wrong. Turtles in Time. This is one of those games that is really disappointing. The fact that I wouldn't see it, don't think I would see this on here, and that's because no Ninja Turtles games made it onto the NES Mini. The second game, the arcade game, is really well regarded. Even the first game that a lot of people don't like. I think a lot of people have fond memories of it, but I think licensing issues keep the Ninja Turtles games from making it on here, which sucks because Turtles in Time is so fucking good. The Quintet games, Illusion of Gaia and Soul Blazer and Terra Enigma, even though we didn't get that game in North America, don't see those. They're well regarded JRPGs, but I just compared to the Square games, I don't know, I don't see it. King of Dragons is this really awesome beat 'em up from Capcom that's probably a little too obscure to make the list. You can find it in, I feel like there's some compilation Capcom put out for maybe PS3 and Vita that actually has that game on it. But yeah, I don't see it. Mario All-Stars, I don't see because they have all those games on the NES Mini. And that I'm not too bummed about because Mario All-Stars, I actually much prefer the NES versions. I think they control better. But yeah, Sunset Riders is this really fun side-scrolling kind of shooter game with two players. Really, really fun. That's a Konami game. Maybe they could get that on here, but I don't see it. Demon's Crest is one of my favorite Super Nintendo games. Like that game is fucking awesome, and it's on Virtual Console. Luckily, you can play that on your Wii U, but I just don't think it's popular enough to make the list. Sadly, Ogre Battle, a very expensive game now, and one I've kind of wanted to try to get into because I've loved Ogre Battle 64. But that game is too. I think that's just too obscure to make the list. It's on the Wii Virtual Console though, surprisingly enough. Not the Wii U, but the Wii Virtual Console. Seventh Saga is kind of like a guilty pleasure for me. I really like that game. It's super hardcore, grindy RPG, but yeah, that's just one of those games that I would like to see. But yeah, no fat chance. Lufia 1 and 2. I know a lot of people love Lufia 2 and consider it one of the best games on the system. It's just not popular enough. I don't see it making the list. Unfortunately, Battletoads Double Dragon, I would love to see. That's a rare game though, so obviously it's not going to be on there. Breath of Fire 1 and 2 are classic JRPGs. Again, a lot of these JRPGs, if they're not like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy 6 and 4, I just don't see them making the list. I see them rather putting other games of other genres in, unfortunately. Evo Search for Eden, which is like this really unique, awesome game for the system, very expensive. I is it? I feel like it might be on the Wii Virtual Console. I know it's not on the Wii U one, but it might not be on the Wii one either, which is unfortunate because that's like this really cool game, one of the Super Nintendo's hidden gems, and yeah, there's no way that would make it. And then finally, I've got Rock and Roll Racing, which again, awesome game, but it's just I don't know, maybe I don't feel like it's well known enough though to make a list of 30 games, but yeah, that's it, guys. This video is longer than I thought, but I don't know. The whole announcement of the NES Mini got my mind racing as to what I wanted to see on the Super Nintendo Mini, which I'm sure we'll get. And it's going to be interesting when they do announce that and the games on it to kind of look back at the list I've created here and to see the differences. But yeah, what do you guys want to see on the Super Nintendo Mini? What games do you think are likely? What games do you think are not likely? What do you think of the NES Mini announcement? I thought it was a really cool surprise announcement from a Nintendo, and I'm definitely going to get it. I think it's cheap enough that I definitely see myself getting it. But yeah, that's it, guys. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.